Welcome to On Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton, your host, joined by CJ Vogel. It's time for the recruiting breakdown each and every week. CJ and I do that. It's brought to you by Mark Saunders of Allstate Insurance. We appreciate Mark. CJ, let's get going here and talk a little bit about the portal because it's heating up now. You're at the what used to be the Army All-American Game. Now it's just the All-American Game down in San Antonio for practices. They're going to have two-a-days today. You're there to see not only Trey Owens, Ryan Wingo, Michael Kern, but also late add from Jasper, a signee for Texas, Ty Anthony Smith, the linebacker. Then there's the Under Armour All-American Game that happens today at 3 o'clock. A lot of 6 signees for Texas playing in that game, 7 in attendance. But before we get to any of that and what you've seen thus far from these guys, I want to talk to you about what's happening in the portal. Because I think that's probably the most pressing thing. Texas players have an extra couple of days here to put their own names into the portal. So there could be some exodus. We don't expect it to be a lot, but there could be a handful. And then also who Texas is targeting and what they're targeting specifically on the inflow. Let's start with the inflow. As of right now, we know of one player Texas is definitely targeting, and that is Jamari Caldwell. The defensive lineman out of the University of Houston. You and I talked about him this morning on Coffee and Football. CJ, what does he give Texas, in your opinion, if the Longhorns were to sign him?
Yeah, should he be added? That maintained level of play that we've seen from the Texas rush defense this year would stay at that level. Jamari Caldwell is that good stopping the run. He is that talented in terms of evading blocks, maintaining gap awareness and presence, and still creating ways to be disruptive, getting into the backfield to stop the running game. That's his strength. That is what he brings to the table on the interior. But, Bobby, what's even more impressive, and Texas saw it firsthand this year, he's pretty good at getting to the passer too. And I know we've talked about T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy and that front seven being great in rush defense. Caldwell will be added to that group, in terms of stopping the run as well. But I think there's an extra level there in terms of getting pressure on the quarterback and getting the quarterback down to the ground. He had 2 sacks against Texas this year, 6.5 on the season, a force up the middle. And I think that is very important when you go into the SEC, not only stopping the run, but getting interior pressure like we've talked about leading up against Washington. That's going to be even more of an importance going into the SEC.
I think it's important. There's reports out that Alfred Collins expected to return to Texas as well. That's tremendous news for
Absolutely.
Texas because it creates depth. It's not so much that Alfred's a great run stopper, but we know he can rush the passer from a 3 or a 5 potentially, and that helps Texas immeasurably as we look forward to the SEC. Hopefully he's able to make a jump his senior year or his final year like T'Vondre Sweat made this past year. A kind of a refocusing of everything he has and mustering all his ambition and effort into this one final year may just bring us something special in Alfred Collins. I'm being told, however, even with Collins returning, Texas absolutely still wants to add another defensive lineman. It is not a position where Texas wants to go into the SEC without guns blazing, so to speak, right? They've got to have that. All right, we want to talk about a couple other positions we're going to get to. First, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, Mark Saunders. When it comes to protecting all your stuff, wouldn't it be great to have one place that protects it all? Here's some good news. Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders is the only insurance agent you need to help keep tabs on protection for all your stuff. Everything from your home, car, and boat to your motorcycle, RV, and ATV. Call Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders' office today at 512-218-8571. Are you in good hands? With over 33 years of experience, you will be with Texas alum Mark Saunders. Give him a call, 512-218-8571. We appreciate your sponsorship of the recruiting breakdown, Mark. Hey, CJ, the other thing that we need to get to are the other positions in the portal that we know Texas is still looking at and attacking potentially. The problem is we don't know if there are guys yet from these positions that are in that Texas definitely wants, at least in 2 of them. And then in a third position, we're waiting on an announcement from JT Sanders, the tight end. We believe he's leaning heavily, and we've been told he's leaning heavily to leave. That being said, he has not announced he is leaving yet. And if he had not decided that as of this after the game. So it's not like it's
right.
He decided before the game and this was going to be his last hurrah. So he's still got a decision to make. He may already have it in his head, and he's just not telling anybody right now. But I do expect him and others to meet with Steve Sarkisian, including Jonathan Brooks and others, to meet with Steve Sarkisian before announcing a decision. Adonai Mitchell, clearly another one as well. But let's talk about the other positions, because I think tight end is simply on hold right now until we find out exactly what's going on with JT Sanders. All right, defensive back. Right now, they are looking at everybody in the portal, trying to figure it out. They could do one of two things here, CJ. They could get a nickel, or they could get a corner and move. If they get a nickel, they can move Makuba to safety and insert a corner or a nickel into that nickel spot. Correct. If they get a safety, they would use Makuba at nickel. He's kind of the Swiss Army knife of this group, because he started 1 year at Clemson at safety and 2 years at nickel. So he's kind of their, hey, we know what we get out of him here. The question is, who's in the portal right now for him? And right now, I don't know that there's definitely a corner or a safety that they're all shot in the you-know-what about. I'm told Julian Humphrey out of Clear Lake, who's been at Georgia for 2 years, is not a potential one for him. What do you think they're really going for here? Is it speed? Is it length? Is it all of the above? Is it experience?
I think it's got to be experience, and it's got to be good experience. You can't just have snaps to have snaps. You have to be a guy with, a borderline all-conference caliber, career under your belt already. Texas has already added a guy like that with Andrew Makuba, and as a result, the versatility is there, and it allows Texas to be more selective and even open to, being a little bit more picky in the portal for that right piece. We've talked about at length, Bobby, the I wouldn't say the lack of athleticism, but just the lack of closing speed in the secondary. I think that comes with great talent, and obviously the experience and production on the field is coming to follow. With Makuba specifically, his first year as a safety back deep in the field position, he was a freshman All-American. He moved up. He was a little bit more, learning the nickel spot a little bit more that second year. The third year, he really came on in 2023. You started to see just why he was as highly coveted coming out of Austin LBJ as he was. The instincts are there, the experience is there, and obviously the accolades are there as well. I think Texas is looking for a guy similar to that to jump into the portal at the final hour before they really start making a move. And again, like you said, a nice safety belt with Makuba, because that doesn't put Texas up against the fence to say we've got to take a guy to a certain position out of a dire need. Makuba allows flexibility, and it allows them to be picky to find the right fit.
All right, I'm looking at wide receiver next, because we've been talking about this. Adonai Mitchell, you could say this is similar to the tight end spot. Well, are they going to need another guy if Adonai Mitchell stays? Well, I mean, we think that's more like 90-10 right now that Adonai Mitchell leaves. I mean, he's a young man that still has to meet with Sarkisian as well. But he just got mocked earlier today in the first round ahead of Xavier Worthy. Worthy announced for the NFL draft. We know Jordan Whittington's gone as well. This has been the situation we've been talking about, since this season started. Who's going to be the guy next for Texas at receiver? Because you expected to lose 3 guys this offseason. If Mitchell returns, I don't know that they need a one. I don't know that they needed one. But I don't think that guy that they're really going to go after right now is necessarily in the portal. They took a pass at one point on Deion Burks, who's going to be a second or third round pick maybe out of Purdue. They took a pass because they thought they had enough of that type of guy maybe, or they thought there might be somebody better entering the portal. Evan Stewart out of A&M is in, but it looks like he may be going West Coast, USC and Oregon primaries for him right now. We're sitting here. It's January 3rd, CJ. The deadline to enter the portal was January 2nd for other players, but there's a 48-hour waiting period that now we have to see if anybody else enters. There's been all kinds of names tossed out. We'll see if any of them enter. It could even be a guy. I mean, look, you say what you want, but guys at Texas could enter the portal in 5 days. Guys from Alabama, Georgia, a guy from Alabama just entered yesterday, Shaz Preston, for example. Washington, Michigan, all those teams still have another 5 days. So those teams don't really count on that timeline. My point being, right now, it doesn't look like there's a wide receiver they've even honed in on even if Adonai Mitchell does go pro?
I think you're absolutely right. Should AD Mitchell return, I think that alleviates any need that you would be looking for immediately in the portal. That is your wide receiver one if he returns. And like you said, it's not looking exactly likely. Anytime you're receiving a first-round grade as a wide receiver, more times than not, no matter who else is in your wide receiver class, you're going to be departing for the NFL. It's interesting because you look at a Matthew Golden and you look at a guy like Jonte Cook, who has the limited game experience but a high rating to his name, a lot of talent that's still raw a little bit, still earning his stripes in terms of being a college wide receiver. The duo of the two of them is very exciting, but I think that there's very much a similar build and play style between the two of them. Is Sarkisian for his wide receiver one that we've talked about? Is he going to go look for a bigger body like AD Mitchell in the portal? Will he look for a guy of a similar build like Jonte Cook or Matthew Golden? We've seen at Alabama the Devontae Smiths, the Jalen Waddles, the Henry Ruggs of the world. It seems to be what he likes to approach his wide receivers as. I think whether or not it really matters, it comes down to having production on the field and experience, because we've obviously seen just how tight-knit that wide receiver rotation is. If you have the trust of Steve Sarkisian, you're in that group. If you don't, and it takes a while for you to get up to the speed, good luck finding the field.
Yeah, we talked about that this morning. It's kind of like, you got to get to that level, or else he's not going to just rotate receivers to be rotating receivers. Jonte Cook, plenty good, but he needed. I mean, he is not as experienced as Xavier Worthy and AD Mitchell and Jordan Whittington. He will be in that group this year along with Matthew Golden, we believe. Then it's kind of a who's who. We try to figure that third piece out and go from there. All right, that does it for for the portal recruiting at this point. I would say a couple other things that it relates to that. Always keep in mind, if there is a big name that goes into the portal at one of these positions, that could change the calculus. Right? So if it's a great player and they think can go get a great player at whatever position, except for probably quarterback, they're probably going to take a look. So just I would say that entire section of portal talk there's a caveat that if there is a great player, bets are off. And if that great player, not the Walter Nolans of the world, fit what they're trying to do. If they fit what they're trying to do. All right, let's talk about high school recruiting. Longhorns signed 23 this past month. Early signees, CJ. They're really looking at it. Looks like probably just one more guy. They've talked to Terry Bussey, but that just doesn't look like it's going to happen. The athlete out of Timpson, he might end up at Alabama, LSU. I would put more money on him ending up there than I would his commitment to A&M at this point. But the defensive line, where Texas lost out on Dominic McKinley, the defensive lineman out of Lafayette, Louisiana, over the weekend, he actually committed to LSU. What about Alex Foster out of Greenville, Mississippi? Is this a situation where, hey, he's next up and Texas is going to continue to recruit him? What's the situation there?
I think it absolutely is the case. We've talked about it prior to signing day. There were three guys that Texas was really in on at the defensive line position prior to that early signing period. It was Dalen Evans out of Pine Tree. He inked his signature to Texas A&M. Obviously, Dominic McKinley flipped really in the middle of the night almost to LSU on New Year's Eve. And now Alex Foster, who visited to Texas the week before the early signing day period opened up. So I think that is where Texas will look. And I know, Bobby, you and I have talked about it. Folks inside the building are very high on Alex Foster. They're very excited about the possible prospect that he could develop into. There's a lot of raw tools with Alex Foster. You see it on film. There's not a lot of fine-tuned technique. It's all, really pure strength and bullying that he does in the trenches. And I think anytime you see a kid from Mississippi or anywhere in that area who's able to put that on film, and then you get an idea of, down the road what that could turn into with a good weight session, good athletic department, and good, nutrition, I think there's a high ceiling there. So I think Alex Foster is that answer if Texas looks to add another guy for the defensive line in the late window.
All right. Here's a couple other things for you. All right. I want to talk about 2025 recruiting because the junior day is coming up. I also want to talk about Anthony Williams, the linebacker out of Pearland Shadow Creek that committed to Texas on New Year's Day. But before we get to that, I want to ask you about where you're at right now. San Antonio, you see the Alamo Dome behind you. You were in Orlando earlier, or actually later last week, to see the 7 guys that Texas has got commitments from in that game. That game gets started at 3:00 today on ESPN, the Under Armour game. You're at the All-American game in San Antonio now, getting ready to watch Trey Owens, Ryan Wingo, Michael Kern, and Anthony Smith practice. What are you picking up from being around San Antonio and Orlando? Just major talking points at this point for this recruiting breakdown.
Well, first off, it's nice to be here after the new year rather than, December 26th or 27th for another reason. So that's nice.
No Alamo Bowl. Are you making a hit at Brent Venables and the Sooners there a little bit?
Hey, whoever plays here, I'm just glad it wasn't Texas this season. So that's always nice. But I think the biggest thing that I've taken away from the last, couple days on the recruiting trail out in Orlando and now in San Antonio is these kids are excited to go play for Texas. They're excited about the culture that's there. Obviously, the playoff run was fun. It's a good building point, I would say, for what they hope to jump in and be a part of. Bobby, I even want to mention the Matthew Golden tweet from late last night. If you saw it, I'm excited to go be a part of the culture. Hook 'em sign, I believe is what it was. That right there is not really what you have heard from Texas recruiting over the last decade plus. And so I think that is very encouraging. Right now, Trey Owens was named the MVP of the West team for practice number 1. I talked to him very briefly. I got here pretty late because they switched up the credential location on me at the last minute. But I did get it here for the last 10, 15 minutes of the first practice Wednesday morning for the West team. Ryan Wingo and Trey Owens are on the same team. There's a connection building between the two of them that I talked to Trey Owens about. He said, dude, the route running is there. The physical ability is there. He is all world at receiver. That was my biggest question mark about Ryan Wingo coming into really the next level as a college wide receiver. Is he going to be fine-tuned enough at the wide receiver position to create space, not so much relying upon just being a physical freak? Because that's the nuances that good receivers take and learn and really study to become great receivers. I'll be taking a closer look at that this afternoon when he gets in the one-on-one situations against the East later this afternoon. So I'm really excited about that. Trey Owens had great things to say about him. And obviously, Anthony Smith, how does he fit into what Texas wants to do as the only linebacker in the class as well?
Got it. Very interesting stuff there, CJ. Over in Orlando, give me a couple of takeaways from that situation.
Yeah, it's very defense heavy. 5 of the 7 are on the defensive side of the ball. A lot of versatility with that defensive back group. Obviously, Xavier Filsaime is the number 1 guy, if you will, that 5-star by his name in the secondary. True safety. I think Sarkisian even mentioned it looked like he was made out of a lab to play safety in his National Signing Day press conference. He is physically there. He's mentally there, and I think the instincts are going to carry over as well. He played for a good defense over in McKinney. And then just talking to Jordan Johnson-Rubel was one of the biggest takeaways that I had from the week. He is probably the smartest player I've talked to in this cycle. When you talk about understanding coverages, schemes, and concepts, that's all he ever wants to talk about. IMG coaches raved about his leadership and passion for the game. If you want to talk about guys that get playing football, that's him. It's not necessarily a athletic guy that plays football. He's a football player that is athletic. And so I'm excited about that. And those are my 2 guys that I like really a lot in that secondary.
Gotcha. You also mentioned Jarrett Gibson as a guy that you really liked at a different time in our interview, and we'll talk about him more at another time. All right, before we get to Anthony Williams in the 2025 class, which is coming up just around the corner, I want to say thanks one last time to our sponsor of this show. That's Texas All-State agent Mark Saunders. He's the only insurance agent you need to help keep tabs and protection for all of your stuff, everything from your home, car, and boat to your motorcycle, RV, or ATV. Call Texas All-State agent Mark Saunders' office today, 512-218-8571. Are you in good hands? With more than 35 years of experience, you will be with Texas alum Mark Saunders. Give him a call, 512-218-8571. Let's talk about 2025 recruiting now. Anthony Williams, defensive a linebacker / edge, 6'3", 195-ish, out of Pearland, Shadow Creek, commits to Texas over the weekend or on New Year's Day, actually, so Monday. He's the first in-state commit for the Longhorns, CJ. Okay, so add into that guys like Brandon Brown, the defensive lineman out of Ogali, Florida, KJ Lacey, the quarterback out of Sierra and then Amari Winston, tight end out of Georgia. It's my understanding that Texas is in the process of getting more players to this January 20th recruiting weekend. That's going to be the initial focus for the Texas coaches over the next week or so. But already it looks like it could be a star-studded affair. What did you think of Williams? And give us a hit a little bit on what's going to happen on that January 20th weekend, in your opinion.
Yeah, I'll start backwards. I know I was in Orlando and, really starting to think ahead to January 20th, Junior Day. So much so that I started hitting up some of the guys that you would think would be in attendance. And, there's a little bit of a wait and see right now. I think it was a little early to hit them up. Obviously, we had yet to hit the new year. Coaches were still in bowl preparation. Some had heard about the Junior Day, some had not. And so there's still invitations being sent out, some late additions that you'll see announced on Twitter or through, us, whether or not they will be in Austin for that event. But like you said, some of the names that we've heard trickle in so far, very exciting. I think it'll be a good event to start the year. But going to Anthony Williams, and I think it is a testament to the prospect that he is and how the staff views him to take his commitment this early in the cycle. First, it's a great linebacking group at the top in the state of Texas this year. You talk about Elijah Bo Barnes at Skyline, Riley Pettijohn at McKinney. These are all, top 50, top 75 nationally ranked guys who have great film and are very high on the Longhorns early on. But with Anthony Williams, I think it's the versatility to drop back into coverage and also the length and size, if necessary, to come off the edge. And I think what we'll see is a little bit of a start in terms of what we see from Maurice Blackwell right now at Texas is where I kind of view him currently. I think his body still has a long way to go in terms of development. If he's able to get up to about 225, 230 pounds a year into college, he could also move into that edge rushing guy position. We've seen it a little bit. I know Billy Walton's a little bit lengthier, a little bit longer, but he kind of had that similar build his junior season going into his senior year as well. So versatility is there. The athleticism is something that I personally really like about Anthony Williams, and I think he's a really good developmental piece for this class.
Don't forget also about Jonah Williams. He was the district MVP as a sophomore and junior down at Ball High in the 5A category. He actually played safety as a sophomore. A lot of people thought he would continue there, but moved to linebacker. He's 6'3", 203, and he may be a top 10 prospect overall in the country.
Absolutely.
Now, that's going to be a heavyweight recruitment to the bitter end, I'm sure. All right, that'll do it for this week's recruiting breakdown. CJ, I'll be looking to hear more from you about this All-American practice down in San Antonio. For CJ Vogel, and I'm Bobby Burton. Thanks again to our sponsor, Mark Saunders. That's been this week's On Texas Football Recruiting Breakdown. Welcome.